The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the North American SEM Collaborative webinar series. The first webinar we have is on COVID-19 and SEM. My name is Chad Gillis. I'm a member of the leadership team, which will describe many of those individuals. You may have heard of many of the individuals before. We'll definitely just describe those folks later on. But we're excited to have you all join us. We have, I think, over 200 people have registered for the webinar, which is very exciting. COVID-19 is obviously a very undescribably large event that's impacting all of us around the world. So thank you all for making time to join us. So if you have not used a polling application before, this is something we use in many of our webinars and many of our events. It's a thing called Mentimeter, and basically, we like to get people's feedback, and that's what we'll be doing throughout the day here. So our opening kind of icebreaker question is to please describe how you're feeling in 1 to 2 words. To respond to that, go to either open another browser window or grab your phone. In either case, it'll work perfectly. Type in menti.com, MENTI.com, and use the code 423968 or 423968, and describe how you're feeling in 1 to 2 words. And these words are exactly what I was thinking about, except for meerkat. A little surprised about that one. I'm impressed that we're seeing more than. This is a word cloud. If you're not familiar with word clouds, the words that appear most often, will be larger. And so usually those larger ones will be here at the center, and you can see some common words, and again, some ones that are not. I just saw one that says log cabin, which sounds either good or sad. Crazy. I can definitely relate to that as a parent of 2 young children, and my wife and I both trying to figure out how to handle them. Discombobulated. Fortunate, yeah. As you're responding to this, hopefully all of your families and loved ones are well. Definitely are. As you're all connecting, we're all connecting with each other here in this webinar. But as you're connecting with your family, with your colleagues, with those you care about, hopefully, definitely our good thoughts are going out your way to those people. It's good to stay connected with them. And again, good to be connected with you all here today. It's a lot of fun. We're going to keep this going for another few moments. We did a similar question for my team meeting yesterday, and it was a lot of tired, groggy, a bit crazy and so on. Everyone having been working from home for a few weeks when it was not what our typical MO was, and in light of all these different things. I'm turning my head to read the different shapes here that they're coming out. I like the Groundhog Day. That's a great one. Definitely am a fan of that. If you haven't seen that movie, it's pretty perfect for to describe how these days have felt, when every single day seemed like they all run together. The only difference between a weekend and a weekday is usually you don't have conference calls in the weekends. Otherwise, they all feel the same. All right. So with that, we will go back to the slide deck, and we'll get to it. So this webinar series will be covering a number of things. The first is we'll be covering some regional updates, which is, again, this is the first of our webinar series, so we'll be featuring some different regions. The first region that we'll be covering is what I will call the Northeast, which is, if you're familiar with NEAT, NEP in their territory, the Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnerships territory, which is primarily the Northeast, but also we're going to lump in Eastern Canada. But then I'm also going to subtract out Ontario because Ontario is so big, it spans across west of almost all the central time zone, and so we're going to have them be featured in the Midwest updates. But as a part of that, we're going to have some featured, just some quick updates from folks. This is not our main topic today. We'll be talking mostly about COVID and SEM here soon. And so we're going to be unmuting some folks. So we'll be having some introductions done by Martin Lott, Peter Bassett, and Greg Baker. Those are 3 members of the leadership team. And then in some cases, they'll be actually introducing a few of these folks, or in some cases, they'll be speaking on their behalf. And then they'll be in really quick form, fast form, they'll be describing what's happening at a high level within these programs, perhaps related to COVID, and then also what's been interesting or any kind of surprises or fun things that are happening. So I think we should be unmuting Martin Lott, Peter Bassett, and Greg Baker. So we'll go with Martin if you're there. Are you there, Martin?
I'm here. Good afternoon, good morning.
Good. Hi, Martin. Hello. And Martin, you'll have an introduction, and hopefully we'll have Grayson that can be unmuted as well.
Yeah, I'd like to introduce Grayson Bryant, and hopefully my colleague Michelle Keller are on the line. National Grid in Massachusetts and Rhode Island have been doing SEM for a little while now, and yeah, I guess I'll just leave it there and let them take it away.
Thanks, Martin. All right, National Grid team. And Martin, who was the other person besides Grayson you mentioned?
Michelle Keller with Cascade Energy.
Michelle. Okay.
Grayson is not on yet, Martin, but Michelle is.
Okay,
Great.
well, maybe we could pitch it over to her and get us started anyway.
That's perfect. Michelle?
Okay. Hello, everyone. I trust I'm unmuted now.
You are. You're great.
Good morning and good afternoon to echo Martin there. Thank you very much. I know Grayson has some thoughts to share, and I trust he's just delayed for a few minutes. But I'd like to give a shout out to National Grid. As Martin pointed out, Cascade is implementing what National Grid is calling continuous energy improvement in Grayson's territory in both Massachusetts and Rhode Island. And we are just wrapping up year 1 in both Rhode Island and Massachusetts. And without blinking an eye, they were game to continue the CEI delivery through webinar format, very much like what you are doing here, Chad, though kudos to you for the polished Menti introduction and a few other things. We're already taking notes. At first, I'm feeling comfortable speaking because at first both Grayson and his colleagues said to me, Michelle, Cascade is they're the ones making the transitions. They're continuing to do the delivery. But I stressed to him that while we were doing the nuts and bolts, they were the ones who are continuing to support us and continuing to keep the efficiency programs going for the cohort participants. And I think it was a pleasant surprise to them that both we and the participants were willing to continue. So thank you to them. I've got a quick note from Grayson that just came through, Chad and Martin. He says, I'm on, but can't use the webinar.
Oh, too bad. He emailed that to you or texted it to you?
He emailed that to me. I'll just also share that his comments to me were frank. They're pleased with what's going on right now, and they're watching to see how long the pandemic plays out and how that impacts things.
That's great. Well, that's perfect. Well, we're sorry that you can't join us. Again, this will be recorded, and if everyone should have received, all the invitees on this webinar should have received this slide deck, slides that I sent out earlier. We'll make a final version of these slides that we'll also send out that will have some results of these polling questions as well. And so then again, it could be a resource for you and whatever your roles are. So hopefully Grayson can utilize that. But thank you so much, Michelle. We appreciate you providing that update. We'll go next. Yeah, thanks. Now let's go to Greg Baker from the leadership team as well, from BEIC, and he'll be introducing a few folks. Katie Dooley from NYSERDA, Giselle Procaccianti, I think I'm saying it correctly, from NEEP, and also Elizabeth Palchak from Efficiency Vermont.
All right, thanks, Chad. Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right, super. Yeah, so I would like to introduce 3 of my colleagues that I work with both at NEEP, at NYSERDA, and also through Efficiency Vermont. I think first we'll start out with Giselle, since you said her last name so well, Chad, I can never do that. Giselle Procaccianti, from NEEP.
Thanks,
Why don't
Greg.
you start,
Sorry.
Giselle? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. Could you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So thanks for the opportunity to speak this afternoon, and thanks to you guys for holding this session. I think it's so necessary at this point in time. We've been receiving a lot of questions actually on how we're dealing with our work at NEEP and how the region as a whole has been dealing with the program. So thanks again for hosting this. At NEEP, as you know, most of our stakeholder engagement is done in 2 ways. We have webinars and in-person workshops. I can't say that COVID has impacted the webinars much, as you'd expect. We have been hosting all of our usual webinars, and if anything, we've actually seen improved attendance. But we're currently exploring virtual options for the workshops that we had planned for this year. And that would include the annual SEM collaborative workshop that we usually host in October, November. So please keep an eye out for information on that. We found that for our in-house meetings at NEEP itself, that Zoom seems to be the most popular platform that people are using to communicate. It seems to be working pretty good because we can have the entire set of our staff employees present and be able to see each other. So people have been enjoying that capability that Zoom allows. I reached out to the SEM community within the Northeast region just to sort of get some feedback from a couple of folks to find out how COVID has been impacting their SEM work. There have been some unique issues, especially dealing with treasure hunts. As you know, treasure hunts focus on in-person meetings that engage team members in the energy efficiency and saving space. So they have postponed a lot of the treasure hunts until later this year. That's the feedback that I've been getting. And they anticipate that the result would be delayed implementation of energy savings opportunities, which of course will impact both the costs and carbon reduction. Another concern has been continued engagement of team members who are not currently focused on energy savings. They found that their recruitment has always made a difference in program momentum. And the most effective way to communicate with them has been to recruit them face to face. So although online and phone meetings and communications with them has ramped up, they have found that the inability to meet with them face to face definitely has delayed and slowed down momentum. So those are, I'm talking about the trainers, and I say they.
That's great.
Unique, yeah. And in terms of unique solutions, one solution has been to ramp up webinar and virtual trainings on treasure hunts and energy management to keep SEM network engaged. Since most employees are working from home, employees responsible for managing like energy and water conservation programs have had to rely on the internet and internal online systems to monitor and report energy consumption. A lot of the SEM training programs have ramped up their focus on intranet-related communications to better engage employees, which will likely need to continue for the foreseeable future. And also training organizations feel that there's a need to learn from organizations. That's why, webinars like these are important, to learn from organizations, like how they're dealing with the same challenges. And they're willing to share what has been working for them. And finally, I've got feedback that industrial facilities are starting to find their new normal. So some are ramping up production, some are holding production, and unfortunately some are slowing down or closing. nevertheless, they found that a significant number of the industrial sites still want to continue talking about energy efficiency, participating on online engagements, and continuing work in the SEM space as much as they could. So that's it for me.
Great.
Perfect.
Thank you very much, Giselle. Thank you very much. Next, I'd like to
No problem.
introduce Elizabeth Palchuk. She's an SEM coach at Efficiency Vermont, working with colleges and universities right now. Elizabeth?
Great. Hi, everyone. It's good to be with you. I have a couple of updates and working to kind of focus on some key takeaways and how we're adjusting to the pandemic and trying to be responsive. We have a few SEM programs going on right now. One is with wastewater treatment facilities. Those folks have been very engaged. We found that not having on-site trainings actually may work better given some of the long commutes we see here in Vermont. So people have been very responsive to online communications. We're doing our best to be as responsive as we can to the needs of hospitals right now. We're thinking about indoor air quality monitors, negative pressurization units, and opportunities for us to support those needs. Something that my colleague Tim Perrin shared with me, he's an account manager and works closely with the hospitals here in Vermont, is that hospitals have had to delay elective surgeries, so expect a revenue shortfall, which is a real irony. But you know, we're doing our best to even look for N95 masks that might be with some of our contractors that we may be able to facilitate getting to some of these really important customers right now. And then to the hospitals and universities that we're working with, which is what I do, most of the customers that I work most closely with, we're working to get those buildings into the lowest energy states possible. We're working to keep our SEM program going and use the relationships we already have with these customers to offer familiar connections during a time of high stress. And we've really leveraged this phrase, low cost, no cost opportunities, and we're finding our customers being pretty responsive to that when they have to message this to leadership or decision makers at their institutions. Just to give you a quick picture of what colleges are undergoing right now, they went through a really chaotic, rapid transition a few weeks ago when they essentially kicked students off campus. It was really stressful. Had to get international students back to their countries. So we've had to sort of pause our programs and touch in with each of these customers individually to see how they're doing. And what we're finding is that they actually want to continue the SEM program, in part at least because of an internship program that we've connected to this SEM program. And what they're seeing is that it's a unique opportunity to keep students involved in authentic learning. Students have a little bit more time on their hands. Learning about energy efficiency creates some workforce development opportunities, something that students will be able to put on their resumes. So we've been asked to create a little bit more structure around our internship offering and continue the SEM program. And I'll just highlight that it's been different for each college. So 3 of them wanted to stay the course and keep moving. They just needed kind of 2 weeks to regroup. And then one of the colleges has a large commuter population, and those students are also parents. And so that college had to drop out. So I just want to highlight the importance for us that we found in touching base with our customers one-on-one and being as responsive as possible. And then a really creative solution that we found that we're pretty excited about, this is from Tim Perrin again, is borrowing from the sleeping plant tours that we might be familiar with. So when plants kind of ratchet down operations, there's an opportunity to go in and do treasure hunts and things like that. Well, we're going to borrow that concept and we're going to create napping campus tours and use this opportunity to go into buildings and look for upgrades. Of course, the challenge right now is that we're all sort of stuck at home and we're not able to physically be there. So our team has ordered a universal head mount for smartphones that we sent to one of our customers in southern Vermont, in a small college down there. And once she has the go-ahead to get into her building, she's going to go through the building with this head mount and her smartphone, and we're going to do a virtual treasure hunt with her. So we're going to support her through this process, through a virtual space. You know, the limiting factor will be bandwidth, really, and is the internet system supportive enough to be able to do this? But we're going to give it a shot, and she's a willing kind of experimental partner in this. We're using the energy maps that Energy Star has developed as sort of a supporting tool to facilitate self-led treasure hunts. So this is something really creative that we're going to try to maintain these relationships and bring value to our customers. But in closing, you know, I think we're finding assume nothing, talk to everyone individually, and we're just finding that we need to be as responsive and creative as possible right now.
Oh, thanks so much, Elizabeth. That was really wonderful. Thank you for sharing all those details.
Sure.
And last but not least, I want to introduce Katie Dooley. She is the project manager at NYSERDA, running their industrial SEM program. Katie? Katie, are you on mute?
Hopefully we are in the process of unmuting her.
She
Neil,
should be unmuted. She's says she's inattentive. There she is.
Katie, can you hear us? Uh-oh.
All right. We can tell you what, we can come back.
Yeah, we'll come back to Katie later. Thank you.
Greg, thank you so much for the introductions and for engaging with Elizabeth, Giselle, and Katie on this. This is great content. And now we'll go to Peter Bassett, who will be unmuting here in a moment. And he, as I understand, will be either speaking on behalf of 3 individuals from Efficiency Nova Scotia, Énergir, and Hydro-Québec. Peter, are you there?
Yeah. Hi, good afternoon, good morning.
Hi, Peter.
I guess I'll speak first for the most northernest eastern program, SEM program on the continent, Efficiency Nova Scotia. So they've been delivering SEM in the region to the industrial market for 5 years. Started in a cohort model, have evolved to individual engagements, which have turned into multi-year engagements. So it's up to 3 years for some of the initial participants. And they're focused on integrating SEM and EMIS and capital project work within the SEM portfolio. And I think right now, the activity is largely carrying on because a lot of the engagements are web enabled, but some of the smaller plants have definitely put the pause button on activity, whereas the larger plants are continuing to operate and continuing to be engaged in the regular SEM process. Going to Quebec, the neighbor heading west there, Hydro-Québec started really down the SEM pathway in 2013, so they've been at it for about 7 years for the large industrial market. They have quite a different model, I think, than many in North America. They are focused on having organizations basically implement structured energy management systems in concert with a customized energy management information system with sub-metering to gain better visibility of energy within the plants. And they walk the participants through 3 steps: the planning, the implementation, and then the operational support for that. So certainly for the companies who are moving within those pathways or at the operational stage, things are carrying forward. At the plan stage, we're seeing some of the plants very much impacted by the COVID situation, where travel in Quebec is actually prohibited right now, except for essential services. So there's definitely an impact on the front end of the process of bringing people down the funnel through the planning stage. But with the existing participants who are already at the operating stage, things are more carrying on as normal. Énergir is the gas utility, which is the mirror, so to speak, of Hydro-Québec as the electric utility in Quebec. And they've come to the market much more recently, but they very much mirrored their program process with the process which Hydro-Québec had developed. And so the two utilities are very much complementing and working together with the industrial market. So it's not just an electric program or a gas program, but they're offering their programs together, and they're quite generous with the financial support for industries to implement advanced energy management systems in Quebec.
That's great. Peter, thank you so much. And I know you spoke with these folks and to get these updates, and so we really appreciate you doing that legwork and connecting with them. One thing, Peter did reference EMIS, which Peter is one of the 5 people I think I know in the SEM community that call it EMIS and not EMIS. It's a jab at Peter, not a jab, but a playful thing. But it's energy management information systems. And actually, I should say, many of you are familiar with those, perhaps have them in your programs. Peter has made some really cool resources, especially for NRCan. I think is one of the main program administrators, for lack of a better term, that has some of the things that he helped develop to help evaluate energy management information systems and to integrate them in. So yeah, anyway, just wanted to highlight that. So thank you so much. And I did see a message here that that Kate may be unmuted now. Katie is maybe unmuted, perhaps.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes. Wow. All right.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, it's always weird when you're talking and then people are like, I can't hear you. So I'm glad that it worked this time. So yes, so we are in the middle of one of our industrial cohorts right now, and wastewater. The wastewater cohort started, I believe, in February, so they're very early on in the process, and industrial started last September, so we're a little bit farther along. And on March 17th, we had planned to have an in-person workshop. We did move that workshop to a web-based workshop, and we split it into 2 parts so that it wasn't all day. We figured that it would be very difficult to maintain attention virtually for a whole day, or even for a half a day. So we broke it into two parts of the same workshop and had them in back-to-back weeks. I wanted to mention a couple of best practices or lessons learned, I suppose, from having the webinars online versus in person. One of the things that we noticed is, in person, when you're in a cohort and when you're meeting to go for a workshop, there's a lot of visual cues. And so, if you see somebody talking, or, if there's a question that's asked and you're looking around the room, you can kind of tell who's going to answer. All of those visual cues are obviously gone when you're having a web-based platform for a workshop. So one of the things that we try to do is establish webinar etiquette up at the beginning so people can announce who's speaking, since you can't really see who's speaking. And even though I think we were on workshop 4, we're not familiar enough with each other's voices to be able to immediately pick up on who's speaking. So by establishing etiquette and announcing yourself before you speak, it adds a little extra layer of comprehension to that conversation. Another thing, again, is you can't really tell who's going to speak. So calling on people to speak instead of waiting for somebody to talk kind of reduces a little bit of the awkwardness during those webinars and during the discussion. Another way to keep people engaged is to try to have different different avenues for people to continue to be engaged throughout the entire process. So have webcams if available, have the slides, the workbooks, and then use all of the tools available in whatever online platform that you're using, such as raising your hand, using the chat box. If you have features, we've been using, I believe it's GoToMeeting, and they have draw functions, and so people can write on the screen to, you know, provide feedback. So that's something that we found to be helpful in keeping people engaged. One thing that I do want to mention is we were a little concerned, or at least I was a little concerned about attendance for the webinars, especially considering the fact that we're switching to a webinar platform at such a weird time. But in the first webinar, all of our participants were able to attend, and in the second webinar, all but one. So we really had great turnout. And for the wastewater side, we were planning on pushing back the in-person workshop since it was scheduled the end of April, but there was inquiries to the cohort participants, and they decided the cohort participants really wanted to keep engaged, and so I think we're going to move at least part of the workshop to a web-based platform, and then, you know, follow up in person once we can meet each other again. And then as for a platform, as I mentioned, for these, we've been using GoToMeeting, but since we've been working from home, I think I've used about 7 different platforms for web-based meetings. So GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar, WebEx, Zoom, even Google Hangouts and FaceTime and Skype and all of those. And I think for a smaller meeting, the GoToMeeting definitely is very helpful because it does have a lot of interactive tools. But if you're doing something where it's more of a presenting to an audience, I think Zoom or WebEx works really well for that. And then obviously other ones like Skype and FaceTime are better for one-on-one. We also use Microsoft Teams, and so that's very helpful for working within our department at NYSERDA. So I think that they all kind of have their own little niche, but I do think that for the webinars for the SEM, I think that it's been working really well with the GoToMeeting. And I think this has been mentioned by everybody, but the biggest thing that we have found is being flexible and kind of rolling with the punches definitely goes a long way. And we're seeing that that's also reciprocated by our participants. I think that's all I have.
Katie, that was wonderful. Thank you so much again for all the levels of details here, which I know, again, one theme we'll have across this in this webinar and the other webinar series is that while myself and other members of the leadership team, we know a lot about SEM, and we can definitely tell you lots of things. Wherever we can, we want to get all of you to be engaging with each other, and so these featured regional updates are great. One of the great techniques. We'll also be doing some polling here as well. But again, big kudos. Thank you all for providing these regional updates. And so with that, we will keep on going and talk about COVID and SEM. We sent out a survey, a pre-survey for folks to fill out ahead of time. We had 57 people complete the survey. Thank you so much. There were some wonderful insights that people provided as a part of that. People spent time kind of really thinking some things through. It was valuable. Frankly, it was valuable for us to put the survey together, even to kind of think through some of these things. And again, those results were all the slides were sent to you beforehand as well. But there are basically 4 questions we asked. The first question was how you're engaging with your SEM customers at this time, like right now with social distancing. 4 responses here, you can see ranges of responses, and so everybody didn't have to respond. So you could have checked multiples of these options. First one is basically delaying things as an option, delaying in-person activities. Second one is providing technical tips to people based upon the COVID curveball. Third is deploying phone-based coaching calls. And then lastly is deploying webinars instead of workshops. And so you can see here, again, pretty even distribution of results. People are doing most of not all of these things. Again, lots of webinars, and like Katie just mentioned, we are all becoming quite well versed in every kind of platform that's available for webinars. Again, because I sent it to you before, and we'll send it to you after this with more detailed notes in it, we will keep going. There was a question for each of these. It also is an option for people to put in other responses, and so it's like an open response type of option. And so here we grouped, so the lighter colors. Let me use the annotation here, pen. So the lighter colors in this area are all the actual feedback people had, and this has actually been modified a little bit, edited to fit in these little handy boxes. And then on the left here are the categories I put them into, just for you to kind of wrap your head around what these all are. So erase all drawings. So you can see then that there's people are doing things. Doing things that are related to more programmatic types of things, like developing like lighter SEM products, or leading, like we called it, basically things that would lead customers into their SEM program. So kind of introduce them. Other things to highlight here, just maintaining lots of check-ins, just trying to maintain connection. You see on the organizational side. And I say organizational coaching, a lot of what SEM coaching often is, the non-technical stuff. M&V, rethinking evaluation process to be more remote and faster, or trying to resolve M&V issues that could be supported remotely, trying to do those as much as you can. And then technically doing things like we mentioned here again in the updates, trying to do things that can be done remotely, like developing energy models. Maybe if you have data that you're monitoring for customers on an ongoing basis, perhaps you're watching that and then providing feedback back to the customers about how that's all going. So then to keep this interesting, we're going to flip back to Mentimeter, and let's go to this one. So signal not drawing mode. All right, so go back to your menti.com, type in the code 423968, or if you still have it on your phone or still have it in that browser, the screen should have refreshed. And so we did hear one of the tips from I think from Efficiency Vermont, yes, about like the whole webcam idea on a I guess I would say on a hard hat, if you will, but something that they could like wear in their head to kind of look around. One of my head keeps on going to like the hard hats with the beer koozies on the side, but this is an energy saving helmet. But we want to share some tips on how to do effective socially distant site visits and treasure hunts. So the first response someone had was PPE. That's personal protective equipment. So I would definitely think of masks as the main one to do that. Let's see, we also have here ample prep time and education for customers. Okay, there's the GoPro cameras. Remote DDC audits, so looking at basically auditing control systems from afar. A lot of pre-on-site brainstorming, empowering customers to do it themselves. Using FaceTime, that's great. So you can engage with a single person at once and basically kind of work with them to walk the facility and highlight up and talk through opportunities. Having an area be mapped to study that. We're seeing some great responses. I can't even read it all in time. I will highlight certain things, and again, we will send all of this content to you distilled and put the back into a final version of the slide deck for you to use as a resource. And again, hoping that that this can all be very valuable for you if we turn it around too quickly. Scavenger hunts, remote interval data, headsets, walkie-talkies to still chat while walking 20 feet apart. Nice. Yeah, use webcams wherever possible, break up the treasure hunt into multiple sessions so sites can explore on their own, return to the web meeting for discussions. Okay, I think this is great. We'll flip back over to the PowerPoint deck. Next question is, what would your SEM program look like after social distancing? So right now we're in social distancing. I put, for example, 4 to 8 weeks from now. Hopefully that's not overly optimistic as a time frame. We had 4 basic types of responses that people could choose from, and you can see basically how this was described here. So basically, one of the options, the first option that got 20 or so responses, was to have a compressed schedule to catch up customers, if you will, post social distancing. Maybe having a compressed workshop schedule. The second option here is adapting messaging to highlight SEM as a cost savings measure. Again, was mentioned on the call here from the regional updates, like emphasizing the no cost, low cost. The lack of capital required to participate in SEM could be very, very appealing to folks when you're in a recession time frame. Again, webinars, continue to deploy those afterwards again, and then adapting our messaging how to say this, because to keep things light, if you will, for customers, because again, they're going to be so busy afterwards playing catch up. People had some responses as well, and the open responses, highlighting a few that were suggested. One was like building an online resource library of some solutions available, and when we talk about resources here at the end of this call, we'll highlight some of those that are actually out there right now. Let's see what else. On the M&V side, trying to just assess the impacts of COVID-19 on the energy models and savings of viability. Testing and piloting SEM light types of options. We'll talk about that also in the resources. So very good stuff here. Let's go to the next question, which is about technical measures, things that people are recommending to customers to do right now. We had a couple that were, I would say, typically industrial only, a couple that were pretty commercial, relatively commercially only, and one that's kind of a hybrid. Production lines, trying to help people to understand how they can optimize their production, perhaps if that's an option. Like they could do things in batches, perhaps, that they could start and then shut down, versus before they may have been running full all out. I will say, in one of the feedback things, we definitely found that some customers were, or some of the observations from you all were that some customers are vastly reduced in their production, and some are vastly increased. And we work with a pulp and paper company, one that makes toilet paper, and they are all hands on deck and have been for 6 weeks or so, and will be for a while now. But also then looking at support systems like compressed air and others, making sure that those are shut down when not in use. We've got some scheduling for lighting and HVAC as potentials, and then the increased use of outside air or other kinds of basically air types of solutions. And so seeing some of the results there. I will say too that this is basically whoever responded. So if we had a lot of industrial folks and not a lot of commercial folks that responded, then we may have seen less responses on HVAC as an example. So it doesn't mean that you shouldn't do look at your outside air as a potential measure to recommend to folks. As far as some suggestions that people had, we had again a number here. Looking again, we mentioned like studying 15-minute data to learn where unplanned uses are occurring. So talk if we can do some remote monitoring, or looking at some shorter interval data to try to start seeing where some opportunities are. Had the day walks here. So usually many programs have done night walks as a part of their programs, and so you may have the option, instead of just doing a night walk, is to do a day walk, because no one will be there, and so you should be trying to look for those systems that should have been turned off and are not. Other things to highlight here. Yeah, rainy day projects, things that just couldn't get tackled before, and now you get people that are essentially, I wouldn't say standing around, but you got more ability to get some things done in the organization. Let's see, M&V. I love some good M&B, and this one, if you're an M&B person, and if you think you've got a full handle on how COVID is going to impact M&B, let me know. I'd love to hear that, because it seems pretty. It's kind of a mind-blowing thing. But we basically ask questions here for people to what they're thinking about. And I will say one of the things is people still haven't gotten to it yet, or they're just trying to wrap their heads around what it could be. But essentially, with responses for how to account for COVID in subsequent years. So if you've got a multi-year program, like in 2021, how do you account for this year and the next year, right? So if you say, oh, they get all the savings this year, how does it impact the next year, so you don't get nailed for that? But what is the right thing? Next thing is for the current year, how do you deal with savings claims or results for this current year? How do you handle that? If you are launching a program soon, how do you account for this in your baseline period, right? And then lastly, for customers you're working with right now, what are you doing? Are you monitoring the current data that they have either on energy data or driver independent variable data to look at those things? Are there any significant deviations from the baseline? Many M&B protocols that are out there have basically would want you to discount or potentially to remove or to think about any things that are any data that are more than 3 significant deviations away from the baseline data, and that could be a real possibility to see that in this time period. Other suggestions, definitely a number of them here, and again, kind of highlighting some of these things. So I know one of my favorite people in energy efficiency, and hopefully he's on the line, is David Goldstein. Just a great person, but he definitely called out that COVID-19 makes the counterfactual truly problematic. But yeah, definitely some interesting observations. And again, a lot of questions. We're hopeful that the tool sets that we have will be able to flex, and I'm sure they will at a high level, but there will definitely be some programmatic decisions that have to be made, and so trying to think all those things through. We had asked you to think about the sectors that you work with, how responsive you find these sectors at this time, and so basically how to interpret this graph is if they basically the numbers of how many people are voting for these things would indicate if they're engaged with these customers or typically engaged. Lighter colors would be not all responsive. Dark red would be the extremely responsive, and so hard to see some real trends here. Healthcare, you would say the general idea is that they're generally not that responsive. I say that there's some facility folks. We do work with a number of hospitals, and so the facility folks that are not, while it's all hands on deck in many parts of the hospital, other parts of the hospitals are available. Food processing, plastics, and auto manufacturing also seeing some votes in the dark red categories you can see there. So not 100% clear, but definitely, again, some of these people like food processing, they could be very, very busy, depending on who they're providing food to or what that's all looking like. But definitely hearing in general a good amount of activity. I would say one trend, as I think about recruiting for SEM, usually you try to target customers that are not in a radical upswing or radical downswing in their business. Try to get people that are kind of like a steady, slow growth. Those are like the ideal customers. And right now, they're everyone's either gangbusters or they're going the other way, which can make things very difficult. Some other sectors people did call out, multifamily. If you're working with them, if that's a part of your purview, that they are definitely still responsive. They're still operating 24/7. We mentioned before the reports of curtailment or extra business, depending on which sector we're talking about. And then some that's saying that the sectoral, like the last comment here, that the sectoral kind of view of things is really not the way to look at it. It's really firm by firm, and how they manage things enables them to be responsive or not. So that's the questions at a high level. We have a couple of other questions about questions we are not asking in the survey that we should, and I would like to go, we'll ask those in a moment, but first we will go to some updates from our leadership team and Wendy Gibson, who is our esteemed leadership team leader. Wendy, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, this worked so well. Normally technology doesn't work that well. Thanks so much, Chad. I think that this has been really informative. I've been actually pretty riveted. So this is great. I think it's funny as people were, some of the regional updates were happening, I was nodding my head saying yes, where sometimes they'd say something and I'd say, oh man, that's not been my experience. So it's really interesting just to see how things are playing out. So we just wanted to kind of talk about, as we transition from kind of the current state to the future state, or what we're currently doing, talk about some of the things that we have going on here in 2020, as this is the first of a series of webinars. So Chad, if you want to go to the next slide. So we are going to be doing, like Chad mentioned, a series of webinars. In theory, the series of webinars will be leading up to the SEM Summit, which will be our fourth. Is that right, Chad? Is it the fourth SEM Summit?
Fourth summit. Pretty crazy.
Yeah. So we're going to have basically about one a month here coming up. The next one will be on SEM and V, and kind of the State of Union on what that looks like. And then and that will be next month. And these will vary in times and days, so that we're trying to make sure that if you have a recurring meeting on a certain day and time, we're not hitting that. So we're spreading them out a little bit. So hopefully if you can't make one, you can make another, and we'll make sure that the slides are available and we can put them up on our website as well. In June, we'll be doing IDSM and SEM, so stay tuned for that. And then we're going to be doing some diversity and equity in July, and what SEM is going to look like in 2030 in August. So our hope is that all of that will lead up to a really great SEM Summit. Last year, I think we had 120 people at the SEM Summit, so hopefully we can beat that this year. The other two big things that we're working on, as most of you guys know, is we have our first funded research project on SEM cost effectiveness with, in conjunction with ACEEE and LBNL. We're excited about that. It's kicked off. We have basically just done a literature review of that kind of stuff. So we're looking at kind of where there are gaps in there, whether or not there's any other literature that we're missing out there. If you have any questions on the funded research, feel free to reach out to myself or Chad or anybody else on the leadership team, and we'll make sure to point you in the right direction. And we will hope to have a pretty significant conversation about the research project at the SEM Summit as well, so stay tuned for that. And then the other thing that we're moving forward on is the Negative Savings Working Group, and they are getting ready to send out a survey. So this is your announcement right now. Get ready for a survey on negative savings to come out. We're looking at basically how people are addressing negative savings and what we're doing with negative savings. We need your help. We need your responses. So look for that coming up here in the next week or so. We waited until after this webinar so we could do a big announcement of it. So this is it. Please respond to that survey. And as I mentioned, the 2020 SEM Summit is still planned in the same spot as always in Pacific Grove, California right now. We expect this to move forward unless we hear otherwise from ACEEE, and right now that plan is still in place. The amazing news or the great news from the SEM or from the SEM situation is that there has been so much interest in SEM that they couldn't accept all the different abstracts that were submitted. And so what we did is that we got a hold of some of the abstracts that were not accepted. We're combing through them to see if we can integrate them into the SEM Summit. Additionally, we're working with ACEEE to basically create an SEM Day, where wrapped around the SEM Summit would be panels specifically featuring SEM papers. So we'll have a situation where you can obviously come to the whole conference, you can come to the SEM Summit, or you can just get a day pass and just focus on the SEM panels in general. And that has a lot to do with the amount of interest this year we're seeing in SEM. So we're excited about that. So stay tuned for an agenda coming up here shortly. We're excited to have a really strong SEM Summit this year. Yeah,
And
that's good.
yeah, in Pacific Grove, California, if you haven't been to Asilomar, the site, it is as good as everyone says, maybe better.
Yes. All right, so the last thing we wanted to bring your attention to is just some great resources that may help during this time. So NEA, the Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance, has what's called the SEM Hub. If you haven't had a chance to check it out, please do. There's some great worksheets, templates, resources, great ways to start thinking about SEM in new and innovative ways. You could check out their remote energy management assessment tool you could utilize as well. And then SEM Hub also has some online courses. So this might be a great way to sub for a workshop or perhaps augment a workshop by utilizing some of their courses. If you have any questions on this, again, feel free to reach out to Chad or myself or anybody at NEA, specifically Debbie Driscoll, who's also on our leadership team, and we can point you in the right direction. And then the final thing is obviously the U.S. Department of Energy's 50,001 Ready platform, the Navigator, always a great tool to help direct people, which you could definitely do during a remote one-on-one session and get them identified into those tasks. So we just wanted to highlight those as perhaps some great resources as we look at the virtual world we currently live in.
That's great. Thank you so much, Wendy. This is wonderful.
Yep.
We're going to ask one more question of the group here. We'd like to finish this a few minutes early if we can. We have a few minutes left, so we'll have to move quickly. We'll say that we did get a few messages in the chat. What we're going to do is we'll follow up with some of these in a follow-up communication. We'll maybe ask a few other questions in that as well to, again, foster as much exchange between people as possible. But we'll go back to the to Mentimeter, and I'm going to flip over to the last question I wanted to ask. Sorry, one moment. Okay, here we go. So we go back to your Mentimeter, type in menti.com, use the code 423968, and I would like you to rank these top next steps that you'd want to be taking. We try to distill down some of the potential next steps to take. And so depending on what your role is, you would put these in terms of impact and effort. The 4 options you can see here are questioning assumptions on how to do SEM lighter and easier. Can you challenge yourself? How can we make this lighter and easier to do for customers? Second is to talk with customers, converse with customers on enhancing the SEM value, so you can basically to enhance the value proposition for SEM, both now during COVID and as well as post the COVID timeframe. So talking with them about how do you change that message to include more low cost, no cost kinds of messaging. Next, making a rough plan for how to handle energy model impacts for or from 2020. So just kind of thinking that through and just kind of charting it out at a really rough level. And then lastly, getting more enhanced technical measures to my customers. So getting those to them as quickly as you can. So we're seeing people here plugging these in and seeing, it's interesting. I was hoping to see a nice, great R squared. I'm just kidding, for these statisticians, that wouldn't make sense at all. There was an audience question: is the SEM Summit on Wednesday, August 19th or Tuesday, August 18th? It's the Wednesday. I thought the August 18th was the Wednesday, but it is the Wednesday. If you're planning to go to the SEM Summit, please look at the ACEEE website to make sure we're right, and look at a calendar. This is great. Okay, we've seen some great responses here. We've had 34 responses to this question. Are there any other questions from the audience? I think we are good. Okay. Well, with that, we are at the time. Thank you so much. Please stay safe. Best to you and your loved ones. again, best from the leadership team here: Wendy Gibson, Greg Baker, Brian Albert, Peter Bassett, Debbie Driscoll, Martin Lott, John Nickel, Walt Tennyson, and myself. Thanks so much. Stay safe and have a great day.